For many, February is the month of love and romance. The flowers, cards, candy, and dinners for two. But we all know that real love goes beyond a month, and it takes more than a few romantic gestures to keep the home fires burning. Good evening, and welcome to our monthly WHUR-WHUT-TV special edition of the Daily Drum. I'm Harold Fisher. If we were to believe reality TV, love and marriage consists of days filled with drama after drama after drama, and yes, even more drama. But that's not real. In fact, marriages are still flourishing and happening every day. But what makes a happy marriage, and how do you stay true to those wedding vows for a lifetime? We're going to try to answer those questions and more. Our topic, to love and to cherish. My guests this evening say marriage is everything, and they believe black love is still very much alive and well. JJ and Trina Hairston have been married for 28 years. He is a gospel recording artist, and they are pastors of All Nations DC. Of course, we are not taking phone calls tonight, but you can join the discussion using the hashtag Love and Cherish. Remember, tonight's broadcast is being streamed on WHUR.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate you guys coming in.
We're honored to be here. Thank you for having us.
All right, so let me get in your business.
Okay.
All right. You two have essentially been together since you were teenagers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But it hasn't always been Valentine's candy and flowers.
No.
You know what they say, life ain't no crystal stair.
No.
Exactly.
Give us some insight into what you call your miracle marriage, Trina.
I think it's because of the fact that, just like you said, when we first started off, we were young and we really did not know ourselves, much less really know and understand how to get to know each other. And so we jumped into marriage without realizing the responsibility of marriage. And we had some tough times. I'm not going to lie. Our honeymoon phase, I think we're living more of our honeymoon phase now than we did when we first got married. But the miracle in the story is that we did not get a divorce. And I call it a miracle because he actually had divorce papers and something stopped him. You know, those days you couldn't just do it online. You had to actually go to the courthouse, get your papers and all that. So he had papers, but never went back and gave them in or never submitted it. And I did not know this. I didn't find out until after we had started reconciling how close I actually was to divorce. So that's why I call it a miracle, because it had to be divine intervention that stopped him from going to that courthouse and, you know, going full-fledged.
But Trina said you jumped in. What was the rush?
Well, we were kids and we're church kids.
Okay.
And there are certain things that you don't do when you're in church, but you're romantically involved, and things that are only allowed for married people.
That's the clean way of saying it.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Oh, well, you can. I mean, we're all adults. I'm listening as adults. You could, you know.
We couldn't get down with the get down unless we were married. So we figured there's a scripture that says it's better to marry than to burn.
Yeah.
And we've taken it so much out of context that we figured the only way to do what we wanted to do was to go ahead and get married and not feel convicted. You know, I'll be honest, she was a lot more convicted than I was. So I was like, okay, well, you know, let's get married. In my mind, I knew we would be together for the rest of our lives anyway. So it was like, well, why not now? Mm-hmm. Not understanding the responsibility that would come along with saying I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after you got married, burning notwithstanding, when, Trina, did you know, after it was consummated and you had a chance to do all the things that under your faith doctrine allows you to do, when you looked at him as a man, when did you really know that you were in love and this was the right thing for you to do?
I always felt that he was the right one for me. I never doubted it. Yes, there were times where I was upset, I was angry, and I'm thinking, you know, is this going to work out? long term. But I feel like I've always kind of been like a settled person. I was never a very like fast person who wanted to date like multiple people and
no.
all that. No, I just not that I'm perfect.
No,
I'm not
way.
saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying that it just wasn't my personality. My parents have been married for I think 60 something years now. I've always been around settled marriages or settled relationships. So my idea going into this is if we're going to be dating, this must be something long term. And I was thinking like that as a child. If I'm going into this, this must be something that's long term. He was such a passionate person about everything he did. He was very career focused. He had a plan. He was always a person who had a plan. And I felt secure. I felt like this is something that, he's looking 5-10 years down the line and he has a plan. His plan kind of derailed a little bit, but he at least had a plan going into this. So I felt secure. All those things that you look for in the beginning of a relationship, I felt like he had those components. And even if he was not perfect, at least he had a conviction about what he was doing. Like if he messed up, he knew it. He had a job at 15, 16 years old. He was already working. So I always knew that it was something that was going to be long-term relationship.
She makes me sound so responsible.
Well,
You
what was the
were.
derailing?
Well, it was the early 20s, and
He started feeling himself.
yeah, I was on my own. I've had my own place since I was 17 years old.
Okay.
But I got to that early 20s, and I realized that I could do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So I started to do stuff that I shouldn't be doing.
And he's so cute, so the girls was looking at him and all that.
I know,
Yeah,
I mean,
and then his head gets big and
I like
stuff.
his hairstyle.
Yeah. See, he got it.
Seems kind of similar. That's fair. You're kind of biased.
Exactly. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't know. I started to see other things, do other things that I shouldn't have been doing, not realizing that if I would have stayed focused on what I had just committed to, I'd be so much farther along now. Like, I feel like we're just getting to the place where we should have been when we were in our 30s. But I also can appreciate where we are now because I understand the journey.
Yeah.
So the miracle for me is that we went from being, considering divorce to now being marriage counselors and pastors together. That's the miracle for me because when I think about what I wanted to do and what I was doing at 21 and 22, I know that I was nowhere near in the mindset I am now.
It's maturity, and
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say for every teenager, young 20s. There's a maturity level of marriage that you don't really grasp until you're older. It's so funny. I was reading the other day that because I'm so interested in the brain. I'm not a college student. I haven't studied this. I just Google a lot and I talk to a lot of people. But they were saying how most of your frontal lobe does not even mature until you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
So there are
And
a lot
I think
of
that's pretty much established fact. Absolutely. Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that you think because how many teenagers always say they start smelling themselves. They think they know what's best for them. They think they have a plan, but you don't realize the responsibility of it until you get into it. So we did hit those bumps.
Yeah.
We did.
This is a WHUR-WHUT TV special edition of The Daily Drum. To love and to cherish what makes a happy marriage. How do you really make those wedding vows last? So let me ask you, how important is chemistry and compatibility to your marriage? And are they one and the same, or do you see them differently?
I'll say, as human beings, we are built to adjust. So as much as chemistry is important, there are things that I'm learning about her now that weren't in existence that when we first got married. So while I need to be able to love her and love everything about her, I also need to be able to adjust my desires and my thoughts to fit who she is and what she wants to do. We had a good friend of ours said something last week that just blew me away. He said, "I've been married 12 times to the same woman."
Interesting.
And I was like, and in my head, like, did they get divorced? No, he said, no, we've been married 42 years. But in that 42 years, she's changed at least 12 times. And we've had different seasons. So while we may have great chemistry now, the we are now is going to be totally different 5 years from now. So more important than chemistry is the ability to adjust for a marriage. I think everyone needs to know that the person you marry now is going to be different 10 years from now. So your conviction needs to be that I'm going to love her, and every change and every season we go through. And that's not based on how we feel about her hairstyle or how I feel about the way she does this and the way she does that, because then that may evolve. But I'm more committed to loving her in every season than I am committed to the chemistry we have.
And I think that kind of goes to the heart of the question, because a lot of times some people may have chemistry. He may always make you laugh.
Right.
You will always like his taste in clothes. You will always be a couple of faith. And some would argue that is chemistry. But in your 20s, you liked movies.
Right.
He liked movies. But now, some 28 years later, you kind of like plays, but he still likes movies. And that's the compatibility piece, where those are the kind of changes. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. I feel like there are foundational things that you need to agree upon. That
Yes,
is
the
things
chemistry
like
part,
faith, finances, the major components. But all these other things may change. But it all depends on my maturity to be able to adapt to what those things are. And as long as those things are not putting me in any danger, and as long as those things are not threatening our future and the things that we have planned for our future, then I feel like I should be able to adapt to some of those things, because I have to consider myself. I'm not perfect. I'm changing. I'm growing. So my maturity says, let me give him some grace to change, grow, and all that. Now, I think that you have to come and have these conversations with each other. If something is changing in the relationship, it requires a conversation. I think the more you submerge the fact that you realize chemistry is changing, the more you submerge that, I feel like the worse it gets. You have to be truthful and honest with your partner and telling them what's off, and prayerfully they'll be willing to adapt to those things and make those changes along with you. But I think it all starts with the conversation. If you don't voice those things, to me, it just magnifies in your head. Like all of a sudden, oh my God, I can't stand the way he does this or the way he does that. Well, have you had that conversation? What did that person say about your feelings or about what you're feeling now? Are they willing to change those things? It's a conversation that you have to have.
What was the point when you thought you weren't going to make it? In the beginning of the conversation, Trina said that you had divorce papers. He's got papers. Why?
I had the wrong circle around me. I was a married guy at 21 years old with all single friends who wanted to do stuff that I was now not able to do because of my relationship. So
They wanted to do single stuff.
yes.
Yeah.
So my marriage became a hindrance for my circle. And just totally being honest, because I didn't value something that was so new in the way I should, what was familiar became more valuable than this new relationship and this new responsibility I had. It wasn't until much later I understood the value of my marriage. It was much more than just an obligation. Initially, after our ability to consummate, our marriage was just an obligation for me. I didn't see it as help. I didn't see it as something that was beneficial for my future. I just saw it as something that was stopping me from doing the things I wanted to do. And because of that, it was like, well, let me end this so I can be free to do this other stuff. Not realizing that my marriage was giving me a level of freedom that I hadn't even asked for.
Mm-hmm.
But now I understand it. And because of that, I am more dedicated in love with this woman than I have been all my life. And
I'm
we've been
cheesing.
Yes, I was about to comment,
You
but
can't
I
see
wasn't
me,
going to
but I'm
interrupt
blushing
you.
over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's wonderful to see, but please.
Yeah,
continue.
after 28 years, she alluded to this. We're more newlyweds now than we've ever been in our lives.
Why do you think that is?
Because I know her, and I didn't know her before.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what I wanted, and I knew what was possible, but I didn't know her. So I married her for all the right reasons around her, but I didn't marry her for her. But now that I know who she is, like there's things that have changed, and she's evolved in ways that are really beautiful. And
Such as?
like she's much more outspoken than she's ever been. She used to hide behind people and things and her other relationships and even being a daughter of great pastors. But now I'm seeing her in this very beautiful way where she's vocal.
There's
and,
levels to me.
yeah. See,
But see, that's what I say. I never put all of my cards out on the table. I think some people get married and this may not be the right thing to say, but I think sometimes people get married and I don't know. I feel like they just lay everything out all at once. I was very reserved, and I think I still
Okay.
am in some regards. So there's still a learning process. I'm always going to keep him learning me. I'm
Yeah.
always going to keep him learning who I am. Not in a bad way, but it's in a good way because we're continuously exploring each other. And I think I thank God that that's the way our life has been going, is that even in our work, in ministry, there's always another level to build upon, always. And I maybe it's just part of my personality, but I think that's why I can still have butterflies when he touches me in certain ways, or, things like that, because there's always something else to explore. And I think all women carry that. I think we all carry a level of we want to be sought after. We want to be chased. We want you to explore who we are. And so I feel like that's what's kept us in love, and that's what's kept us building upon what we have.
This is a WHUR-WHUT-TV special edition of the Daily Drum. To love and to cherish what makes a happy marriage, and how do you really make those wedding vows last? Through that storm that he spoke about earlier in your 20s, what was the turning point for you?
That's a very, very good question. I think the turning point was I had to, and this is going to sound strange, even though we were married, we were, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years in at that point, I stopped looking at him as my husband, and I just started being his friend. Because there were certain responsibilities that I needed him to take care of as a husband, that, as he just said, he was running from responsibility. He was running from the weight of it. And because of that, he and I were great friends. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like, well, if I can just get my friend back, then we can build upon that. So instead of arguing with him, where were you at last night? Why you didn't come home? Instead of doing all that, I was just like, it's good. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm not even going to fuss at him, because then he's going to start looking at me like his mother or someone who's trying to control him. And I didn't want that. I just wanted my friend. So I allowed him to be raw with me. Tell me I knew some of the things that he was doing with these single friends that as a wife, I would not have been able to receive. But once I was secure that I knew that he loved me. I knew that he still wanted to be married to me, but I knew that it was also outside influences that were kind of controlling that situation. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to be a better friend to him than they are to him. I'm not going to judge him. I'm going to give him a place where he can feel comfortable and all that. And like I said, I'm not even sure that this was the right thing for me to do, but it worked for me. And when I say I'm not sure it's the right thing for me to do, because so many times you can look at that and you can say, well, you're going to allow people to take advantage of you. You're going to allow people, or you're going to allow this man to walk over you. I'm not sure that that was the right thing to do coming from that perspective. But in my mind, I felt like I had to do what I needed to do to get my friend back, get him to be honest with me. Okay, you didn't come home. Tell me where you were. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to yell at you. It is what it is. I can't change it. It is what it is. And so when I saw that he was receiving that, when I saw that I became like a welcoming pad for him, and and we started having less arguments, we started getting along better. It just made for a happier place for him to be.
A safe place to land.
A safe place to land. And that, I feel like that's what I became. And that was the turning point when I saw that there was no more rejection. Because at first it was all arguments. And when I saw that he wasn't rejecting my phone calls anymore because he knew that I was not going to argue with him or anything like that, I said, okay, I got him. And sure enough, I got him.
You're a high-profile couple now.
Yeah.
What impact do you believe outside forces have on the success or failure of your marriage?
Jeez.
Now,
Yes.
I really believe there's nothing that could happen from outside of our marriage now that would affect us.
But everybody's watching.
I think because fortunately, all of our struggles happened before social media.
Thank you, Jesus.
So
We didn't even have MySpace.
no, we
then.
haven't. Yeah. So we've been protected in that regard. But now, because we've learned how to control what we allow in our marriage, there's nothing that could come from the outside. If anything happened to us, it'll be because of us, not because of anyone around us.
Yeah, we've changed ours. There's groups and association circles
Yeah.
that we won't run with.
Yeah.
I don't care what the invitation is. I won't run with it because I see what happens to people when they've been in those circles. I've seen what happened to marriages and relationships when you run with certain circles. You got to place a hedge around what's important. You're talking about cherish something. When you cherish something, let's say you went to a basketball game and LeBron signed your basketball game, signed your basketball. You put that basketball in a case. You put it up on a
protect it.
shelf. You protect it. You don't let people touch it. You don't let people, they could look at it, but they can't touch it. And that's the way you have to do with your marriage. There's a certain amount of protection that you have to put around it, because you know that if it gets into too many hands, it loses its value.
I mean, we've even set up certain safeguards when I have to travel.
Yeah.
Like my management knows, even the promoters know. After I finish, I need to go right back to the hotel. I want the first flight out back home the next day.
And we stay on FaceTime.
Yeah, and we stay on FaceTime the whole night.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain things we've known, like we've built as part of our culture of our marriage. It's not even because we don't trust each other. It's just the culture of our relationship that we've built over time that protects us from stuff happening from the outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said earlier that this is almost like the honeymoon period. Talk to me about that. Is this moment the best time?
Definitely.
Definitely so.
It's the best time and the most stressful time at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're working together, we're making moves together. So because of that, we have opposing opinions at times. When we first started, she was working, I was working. She was making more money than me and all that. Roles switched somewhat. So in the middle, I became like the sole provider and all that. But now we're in this season where we're both, even though I travel and do stuff musically, pastorally, we have the same level of influence and input. And because of that, I have to be able to accept her opinion as valid, and I can't supersede her in thought. So it's like, even though we're in a honeymoon phase, we're also in this co-building stage.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Like, we're building together. We're building church ministry together.
I see.
So all of that makes it more stressful, but I also think that makes us appreciate each other more. Yeah. And it even it makes us value our time where we're not building together. And we didn't have that before because we weren't doing stuff together. So when I came home from work, it's like, hey, it's all about me. But now it's like we have to show each other affection because we're both working hard and we're both making these moves. So she needs the feet rubs like I do. Like these, it's a different season, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah.
Best time for you?
Absolutely. Best time for me because, like I said, I go back to that discovering piece where we're still discovering each other. We're seeing new sides. I'm proud of him. You know, he's been in music for just as long as I've known him. He's been in music. But to see a different side of him, to see him grow, learn things, grow, and then to see him delivering on large levels, delivering the word of God and things like that, to me, it just is like, that's my dude. I really love him. I love seeing him mature in this and walk in it even more. So I feel like it's almost like Christmas. It's a new gift. It's a new revelation that we get to talk about. It's a new area of ministry that we get to build with each other. And even though we do bump heads, because we do have different opinions about things,
but she's more outspoken now.
Yes.
And much more than I was.
And believe it or not, as much as I have a profile, there are a lot of people who now appreciate her profile. So I have to accept that as well. And that's different for me because, everyone was used to putting me out there. But now, like, she's doing conferences and stuff. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to be the house husband this week.
I think we're both at 100. And they say that when you first get married, like one person is 50%, the other's other. I feel like we're both at 100. We're both happy with ourselves. And so it makes it freer for us to be happy with each other.
JJ and Trina Harrison, thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation in a bit, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue with this WHUR-WHUT TV special edition of the Daily Drum, To Love and To Cherish, What Makes a Happy Marriage, and Till Drama Do Us Part, how do we really make those wedding vows last?
Are you looking for the latest information and stories that's happening around the DMV? Then you need to follow us online through our social media platforms. WHUR and WHUT, follow us online today.
Welcome back to this WHUR-WHUT TV special edition of the Daily Drum, To Love and To Cherish, What Makes a Happy Marriage. How do you really make those wedding vows last? I'm Harold Fisher. Now, joining me now is Bruce D. Edwards, Esquire, attorney and vice chair of the Prince George's County Commission on Fathers, Men, and Boys. Bruce, thanks for joining the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Let's first talk about the work you're doing with boys and healthy relationships. How did that come about?
Just being a child welfare advocate, just being able to represent children throughout the state of Maryland in the foster care system, but most importantly, through a lot of the youth programs that I mentor youth with, we're looking at them on the backwards in regards to reactionary basis, in regards to trauma having already occurred. But then we started strategizing to say, what's going to be more of a preventative measure, a proactive measure to put youth in the right place, particularly our young men. Having taught in a prison now for like 4 years, I see so much potential there. And many of the young men who sit in my prison class would tell you, hey, I really went awry, I should say, during my teen years. There were no outlets for me. There were no fundamental principles being taught to me. There were no men who actually breathed life into me, spoke life over my situation. So we approach every mentoring aspect with what we do, whether it's with the Prince George's County Commission on Fathers, Men, and Boys, with my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, and the Kappa League. We really have to build these young men up, help them in their maturation process to know who they are, embrace self-identity as well as self-discipline so that they can become husbands, fathers, and most importantly, good community patrons.
I appreciate you mentioning the greatest fraternity on the planet, by the way. And so obviously you are sharing with these boys and young men a variety of things. But as it relates to healthy relationships, what kind of conversations, what kind of work are you doing with them?
We really want them to tap into walking in the spirit of confidence. Also being able to identify if something is troubling them. It's okay not to be okay. Understanding that they have outlets. They also have folks that they can talk to, that they can lean on. And most importantly, being able to disclose whether or not something has occurred and to event a repetitive action. And so many of them move from a sense of trying to handle their indiscretions, but also their insecurities. That's a continuum we often deal with. A lot of men don't know how to express their insecurities. They feel as though they need to be equipped with everything, that they should be empowered with having to know it all. And what you will have is that when those insecurities get exposed, it results in a measure of anger. Then they're dealing with the consequences of that anger. And I often tell them, you either try to hold yourself accountable and discipline yourself, or society has places that will do that for you. And so as a preventative measure, we get them to try to talk things out, try to understand their feelings, process their feelings, and most importantly, channel their emotions.
When it comes to dealing with those romantic and intimate relationships, what kind of conversations do you have? Do you talk to them about those relationships that they are having?
Yes, just over this weekend, as Valentine's Day is approaching, many have often teetered that conversation, both of myself and with some other mentors within my various programs. And really it centers around having to do with the possibility of rejection. How do I...
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a fascinating thing. Drill down a little bit more, because as we know, and we have seen this in the headlines, unfortunately, that oftentimes we have seen young men who have a visceral reaction to rejection simply because, the young lady doesn't want to go out on a date with them. Talk to me a little bit about that. I think that's really important.
It is, because one thing I try to deal with young men on is really the spirit of being honest with where you're at in your situation, being honest about the overall situation when you encounter a young lady. When I start asking exploratory questions, well, how well do you know her? Are you friends with her? Trying to narrow down the scope of everything. How did you get to know her? What are her interests? Does she want to go to college? What does her folks do? How often do you speak with her? Are you in any classes with her? Many can't answer those questions. They're often infatuated with just by her appearance. I said, that's part of it, but you also have to be able to have a conversation. You learn a lot through people, just being able to converse with them. Then we try to narrow that down. Then they understand, hey, I have some more homework to do. And then they understand, how do I really ready myself for the overall approach? I said, when you become friends with them, you can kind of really narrow the scope in regards to being able to estimate where this situation can actually evolve into. And then you would realize, once you know more about them, your level of confidence kind of increases in regards to your ability to approach them. And then when you realize that, hey, even if it doesn't go in my way, it may in fact still work out for my good, even if I don't reach the ultimate result that I wanted. We can still be friends because we first took the time out to become friends.
That is so important, because, and by the way, JJ and Trina Hairston are still in studio with us. And I want to pick up on that point, because during our earlier conversation, Trina specifically spoke about the friendship in your marriage. Right. What are you hearing when Bruce is discussing, even in the youngest of potential couples, because they're not couples. We're talking about potentially developing those relationships. How important is it to be friends, to just like them, not because you're pretty, but because you like the person?
I think it's crucial. That friendship relationship to me is the foundation for what will become a more mature or even romantic or even lead into a marriage. I feel like you get to know the person. I would like couples or even just younger people to slow down and just get to understand almost like the psychology of each other. Like, you have to get to know, understand on a whole nother level a person's mind, how they think, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what are their triggers. Get to know their history. And then from there, I feel like you can build on something. But I think we put so much pressure into the chemistry. Whether or not we feel like this person is going to be, it's going to be good to have this person with us, even for social media views, because I've seen a lot of people get in a relationship because it looks good on social media, or if they feel like they'll have the chemistry in bed. That's to me, that's the way young people are entering into a relationship now, and they're missing out on their friend. They're missing out on what kind of person this is. Who did that person's mother raise? That's who I want to get to know.
Yeah.
I want to know who you were when you were 12, 13, 14, because then that's going to show me a pattern of who you're going to be in your later life.
Internet eye candy.
Yeah.
Right.
Having somebody on your arm,
Right.
even if it's
Or
on
what their
social
physical appearance looks like, all
Yeah,
of that.
that you can match clothes with. And
Yeah.
I'll say this on top of that, to add to what we said earlier about what's keeping us fresh now, none of it is external.
Yeah.
You know, the things that we're learning about each other internally is what's making us more attracted to each other. So I think if we would start to focus more on the internal things and, just what do I love about her besides what I see, like what you alluded to, I think our relationships will last longer. But right now, it seems as if everything is just on views and how everything looks.
But that's, at 28 years of marriage, that's easy to say now.
Sure.
But you two were in the same position that Bruce
Sure.
is talking about with the mentoring of. These are teenagers, are they not?
Correct.
Yeah.
You two met as teenagers. You say slow down. He was like, let's hurry up.
Right.
So to their point, Bruce, how can you get them to slow down and have the mindset of 40-somethings? Have the mindset of 40-somethings when they are still teenagers. How do you give them that maturity injection as it relates to relationships?
The number one thing we really try to institute and reiterate is the power of their purpose, knowing their purpose.
Explain that.
What I often share with young people, I often teach through a lot of affirmations. And I try to tell folks, I say, if it's not consistent with your purpose, it's a distraction.
Wow.
And so that's one thing that they have to you have to be reminded of who you are. Don't look for other folks to validate you or to compliment you. You need to know who you are, what you bring to the table, and move forward with a spirit of confidence and most importantly, a spirit of power and recognition in terms of where you want God to take you. And I think if you're reminded about that, basically life is just a puzzle. How are all of these pieces, all of these occurrences, all of these decisions fitting within the puzzle of my purpose? Then you will slow down. Then you will have patience. Then you can refocus in regards to what really matters. You don't want to be on the back end and realizing that you should never be at the mercy of what matters. You should never allow what matters the most to be at the mercy of what matters the least. And this is what a lot of men do on the back end, and they make choices that have dire consequences. And as I mentioned earlier, I meet a lot of good brothers who have a great deal of potential that's incarcerated. And they would tell you, this is what I lost in regards to my lack of foundation during my teen years. And so we deal with all of that, but it's really reminding them of who they are, why they exist, and what their purpose is actually here for.
This is a WHUR-WHUT TV special edition of the Daily Drum. To love and to cherish what makes a marriage work. And how do you make sure that those vows are, that you stick to those vows till death do you party, even when there's drama involved? You know, Bruce, you've spoken about a lot about what you share with them, but what are they telling you? What are the things that they understand that are right and or wrong about those intimate romantic relationships?
That's excellent. Really, we learn so much from these young men just by listening. They having a platform to bounce ideas off of us, and you would often see that things are moving much faster now. Their questions, their thoughts, their sense of entitlement, this level of just being entitled but not really having a sense of gratitude in regards to the things that they often take for granted. So really what we're seeing is that their ability to have to refocus, and really it's a thirst for the wrong type of attention. And really we see that with a lot of young men getting involved with relationships, not figuring out who they are, but thinking that it's going to validate them. I see a lot of young men partner with young women just for the attention from other guys who they really want to be elevated in front of.
So they'll say they want to date her, not necessarily because they like her, but because of the attention that they can get from others.
It would enlarge, correct. It would enlarge their overall social circle, give them more insight to be accepted by other guys who they want to be accepted by, And so, again, the dangers of this false sense of validation, the dangers of the trappings of wanting to be affirmed by the wrong circle. And then what it does is actually makes your process longer. It prolongs your adolescence. And so those are some of the things that we often try to institute to redirect these young men towards a high calling of their overall self-purpose.
Trina and JJ, you do relationship counseling. I'm sure you have some kind of relationship ministry at the church.
Sure.
Talk to me, JJ, if you can, about that in relation to what you're hearing Bruce explain. What are you doing there?
Well, I'll say this. Before we even had to do it at the church, I have a son. And my son...
How old is he now?
He's 26 now.
Okay.
He's been married for 2 years. He started dating his girlfriend, now wife, when they were like 16 years old.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. History repeats itself.
So what I've learned is a lot of the things that I wish I had a father around to teach me, I've been able to give to him. But then after that, now I've started to think about some of the things I've taught him, and we're giving that to some of the couples we talk to at the church. So it's so important that we have people like Bruce who can talk to the men about relationships, because that's what was missing for me. Yeah. All I had was the circle around me. I didn't have anyone to really give me an impartation of wisdom. So what we've tried to do is share our experiences, not just the good, but the bad, with some of the younger couples and even those who are now together and experiencing issues. Because most of the time, a lot of people need to hear that you can come out of this. This can get better. And we didn't necessarily have that when we were going through, but now that we're on the other side of it, we try to give that wisdom to some of the couples that we're mentoring at the church.
But I think we see some of what he's experienced too. Like most of the people who we talk to and have to coach or maybe even counsel through some of these things are issues stemming from their childhood.
Yeah.
Things that they've never dealt with, like rejection and unfortunately we have like a lot of issues of molestation and people taking advantage of people, and because they didn't have counseling and everything readily available at a younger age, it is now showing up in an older age where they're not as trusting as they once were before or something like that, because someone has broken trust in their life. So I think what he's doing is so critical for our future, and maybe we'll see a break if we can start to heal the wounds of our young people now.
Yeah.
By the time they get to the age where they're ready to start a relationship, those doors would have been closed. But people are going in with with fresh wounds, and they're getting into a marriage with, or even to a relationship with fresh wounds that they're not healed from, and it's causing a problem in them moving on with their lives.
And certainly those are some of the more severe examples, the wounds. But as it relates to attitudes toward relationships, Bruce has been talking with boys and young men. I'm assuming you deal with young women a lot?
Sure.
What is it outside of the wounds and the trauma? But I'm just talking about their expectations about relationships. What is it that you're hearing from them that gives you pause or makes you say, let's stop here, do this, not that?
I can't really say, because the most of the people that I deal with, I think they're healthy expectations, but I don't know if it's coming from a place where they're expecting it from someone because they didn't get it from a dad. All of what I'm finding is that it started off early. And I'm seeing that in women as well. So now they want their partner to overcompensate for what they did not get as a younger child. So I still think we're seeing that. But I think we have women out there who are looking to be treated like a princess, and that could be a false reality, because everything.
And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that JJ would probably agree that no glass slipper today, baby. I'm just going to give you some fluffy slippers, right?
But then my question is to them: what are you bringing to the table? You cannot expect this person to take on full responsibility and you not bring anything to the table. So no, you can't sit back and just have someone right now in your life. Maybe you can't sit back and just have someone paying all the bills for you, and you can't stay at home and just want a social media job. You may actually have to go to a 9-to-5 and work. So I want to know, my question is to them, what are you bringing to the table? So don't just focus on what that person is doing. What are you doing? Let's lay out what you're bringing to the table as well.
Bruce, is it difficult to teach about healthy relationships when pop culture has so few examples?
I think it is challenging, but I think that's what most of the men within the circle of mentoring, we understand that that's what we've been called to do. You have to, and most importantly, you really want to effectuate the change that you want to see. You got to make sure you're living it. I tell men, your words have to line up with your works. And most people are moved by your actions. So it's important that they see us exuding this level of character and integrity on how we move. Ironically, I was out with my youngest daughter just this past weekend, and it's one thing, the type of attention you get when it's just you and your children, as opposed to if my wife was there, it's perceived differently. But the way
How so?
Just like she noticed when we go out to eat, like the daddy and daughter me day, and the way we're perceived at a restaurant, you may have black women serving us, and just the attention. Some folks have even come over and remarked, hey, it's good to see a black man out, being a father, that's a husband, that you're doing it. Thank you for being that example. And so it speaks to a level of, on one hand, you giving my daughter something to aspire to, but on the other hand, you understand that the remarks are often rooted in, I'm the exception and not the standard. And so, we have to get back to where this should be expected. This should be a given for us to be present, for us to be involved, for us to be available. And that's just men being men. And one thing about it, when we get in front of these young men and they can understand that, hey, I can rely on Mr. Edwards, there's some level of trust there, they also move in confidence to know, instead of me doing this, I can do that, just by the way he lived his life as a man of character and integrity, and by me being able to walk it through.
How old is your daughter?
My youngest is 11, my oldest is 18, and she's a student here at Howard, freshman.
Okay. Excellent. Because and I really appreciate that, because when my daughter was whether she was a little girl or even, kind of her mid-teens, doing all of that. The funny thing is that now she's 24. We go out to dinner and I get the side eye. The older guys with these younger women. That's my daughter.
Yeah,
Sam.
Right.
And she's still my favorite person.
Uh-huh.
But I think that's really important that in developing the relationships, and I think Trina kind of touched on that, and so did JJ. As a father, developing that cohesive father-daughter relationship, it sets the foundation for the solid relationships.
Yeah.
For example, because as you said, because you didn't have the father who could tell you do this, not that.
Right.
That it was, you had to. It was trial by fire.
Yes. Right.
It was definitely trial by fire. To the question that I was just asking Bruce, in your ministry related to relationships, is it difficult to come up against pop culture images of relationships, the money, the infidelity, the immaturity, the arguing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk to me about how you have to deal with those kinds of images.
Well, similar to what Bruce said, one thought I've always adapted to is that people hear what you say but do what they see. So what we've had to do is battle or give them something else to compare to. Let me say it like that. So instead of having them look at pop culture, look at the strong marriages that are around you. So part of what we've been doing with couples, initially we were just mentoring couples one couple on one. But now we have a group of married couples that come together on a monthly basis and just kind of talk through, like with curriculum, but talk through some of the stuff that marriages face. Because in that room, we have the couple that's been married 42 years. And then we also have the couple that's only been married 8 months. So you're able to learn from other couples that you're not isolated in what you're experiencing. But then outside of that, you have these couples who have strong marriages but have had issues. So if you can see that, I'm not alone. I can go through this and we can still make this work. Then you don't look at the pop culture and say, if you argue, that means divorce is next. Because that's what you see. You see this couple, somebody you really look to as a great couple, all of a sudden you see an Instagram post and say they're getting divorced.
Right.
So that becomes the norm. So what we're trying to do with this ministry is present a different norm.
Yeah. I think we have to show them, too, what those statistics are. Because what I'm finding is, and maybe this is just, I don't know if it's just a DMV thing, because remember, we're from Connecticut.
Right.
So I think it's a different demographic here is what I'm finding is they want hardcore facts. Open up the book and show me, give me statistics, show me what's lasting, show me what's not working. So I think for us, what has been helpful is to show them what's not working. History always has a way of repeating itself. And so we've seen these marriages in Hollywood and all this. We've seen how this goes, the lights, camera, all that, but then what's happening behind closed doors. And so we trying to teach them, don't get wrapped up in what you see, but like he's saying, offer them a different perspective and let them know you got to be different. You can't go with the trend. You can't always go with what you're seeing on TV. You have to be different. And we're teaching them how to establish their own culture, establish their own environment, and not to be so easily influenced. But it is difficult. It is because it's everywhere. Influence is everywhere, so it is difficult.
We did not talk about your marriage, Bruce. I'm going to get into your business just a bit. You've been married for how long?
18 years.
18 years. What have you learned? Do I need another hour?
No, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn the spirit of patience. You understand that your greatest gift and your greatest asset is time. With time, you make memories. And with that, you take every moment you have. just really just admire that moment, and you just really continue to nourish that moment. Ironically, my wife is also an attorney, and so when we started out, it was a lot of speculation as to how this union would work. At the time, it was kind of atypical. Hey, well, you like an alpha male, and you all are going to be debating, arguing all the time, and it was actually none of that, because we understood, most importantly, who we were. We understood our own level of personal conviction, and most importantly, we understood our individuality in regards to our purpose as to why we were here. We took the time out to get to know one another. We understood that, we were not trying to define ourselves through each other. And most importantly, we was on the same wavelength. We was, as they would say, equally yoked in terms of how we entered marriage. Mm-hmm. And that was sustaining and fulfilling for us.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Very,
very much so. Very much so.
What have you learned, JJ?
I've learned that I have the ability to grow instead of decline.
Okay.
I think that when I was younger, I thought I would hit this age and then that's it. And now we're here in our 40s, and it's like, I have much more to go, and I could grow and I could become. Mm-hmm. And I'm so excited that I'm partnered with somebody who is also becoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trina, I'll let you have the final word. What have you learned?
Patience. Mm-hmm. I don't want what happens fast. I want what takes time to mature, and I'm changing that. In my older age, I'm changing that. Mm-hmm. That it's worth the wait.
How about that? Yeah. The definition of what makes a successful marriage expanded exponentially over the past 30 years or so. That's about how long ago JJ and Trina first started dating. Well, the pressure to stay together is greater than it has ever been. The options that exist for couples to split are plentiful. So why bother? Well, the one thing that is consistent for marriage is love in its many evolving forms. Is love enough? We would hope so. So if you're married and in love, keep working on it. It's worth it. That is the Daily Drum. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org.